Whoa. Wow. Let's get that a little bit tighter. Awesome. So good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is, wherever you're at. Thank you for tuning in, and also thank you for support and watching the videos and just supporting me in general. Today's vlog is something a little bit different. No fancy edits, no fancy cutaways, no B-roll, none of that stuff. I just wanted to get into books. And more importantly, the books that shaped me and also changed my perspective in general. You can definitely play this video in the background. This is nothing that you have to rush through or pay your undivided attention to, because I'm just going to be talking throughout all of it. But maybe one of these books might reach out and speak to you the way they spoke to me. And sharing is caring. This particular video was inspired by a number of different things. One of them being the fact that I am going through a bit of a dry spell when it comes to reading at the moment. My Audible, my Medium, my Blinkist, literally everything that I have that I use to make reading books easier, I haven't even used this year. And I've read probably about 2 or 3 books. A bit gutting for me, because I genuinely like books. I genuinely like taking my time to take in information, but taking in the best of what somebody has decided to curate for you. And reading books has been a big part of that. And so today I just wanted to share the books that kind of color my perspective on life, have made the biggest differences to me and how I think, in an attempt to kind of reinvigorate my passion for reading and my thirst for knowledge. So before I decide to get into all these books, I would like to preface this by saying this is the 3rd time I have shot this video, because twice my microphone died on me and stopped me from filming this footage. So I'm gonna try one more time, and if it doesn't work out, then no Thursday vlog. But if you're seeing this, it means that the vlog worked. Anyway, back onto the main topic of discussion, which is my distractibility when it comes to reading books and achieving tasks. Of course, nowadays we have so many things to distract us because life gets busy, work gets busy, and that actually brings me onto the topic of one of the books which was actually discovered and recommended by one of my followers, and it's called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. Now, this book is a total concept about finitude. 4,000 weeks is the average lifespan of a human life, and how we choose to spend it relates to the finitude, how our time will eventually run out. And we have no choice but to choose how we spend our time, and choose it quite wisely, but also be intentional. Sort of like how I am sitting down to do a one-take shot on a YouTube video for you guys, or how you may sit down for 2 or 3 hours to read a book. The fact that we can be easily distracted by so many other things around us. We could be spending time with friends or family or doing XYZ, but we have to know to accept time. Now, the way I tend to read books is I tend to dog mark the pages when I find something important. Sometimes I will scribble on it in pen or pencil. Ironically, I left a message to myself in this book on the back of the receipts. And it actually says, to live is to accept one's finitude, bow to the reality of time, and enjoy what's given to you now, which I think is a pretty apt message on the summary of what this book is about. And it definitely colored my perspective in life, just to accept things as they come and accept that I cannot be present everywhere and I have to be intentional in the things I do. So yes, that is Oliver Burkeman's 4,000 Weeks. Speaking about intentionality and how I came across this book, the fact that a follower recommended it to me makes me want to describe to you how I tend to choose a lot of the books I decide to read. And why I read the books I read. Sometimes I could get books from podcasts, I can see posts, I can see authors, I could hear work from authors, and then that will drive me to the book. But a bigger driver for me and for reading is the idea that I will forever know what it is like to be a black male going through life, right? And there are certain perspectives of life that I haven't garnered. And who's to say that my perspective is the truest perspective or the only perspective just because it's the only perspective I know. And part of when I read is that I often want to find perspectives that are different to mine, or that challenge my fundamental beliefs. Because if they challenge my fundamental beliefs, I can be curious about the world and I can ask more questions. And ironically, there's a book here called The Brain by David Eagleman. And this is all about how our brain functions, but not just that, it's how we all perceive the world differently, and how none of our perceptions of the world are necessarily the right perception, but all of them are equally as true to us. But also some interesting facts about the brain, which plays to the medical side of my life. And what I found interesting is like how he described how if I asked two people to think of the color red, so if me and you were to think of the color red, you would have a shade of red that might be completely different to my shade of red. And what you class as green might be different to what I class as green. And it's just because we have two different perspectives. And I think that's very important to take into account when I read. And so I'm always trying to take into account the different perspectives and the different nature and the different ways people will go through life. And speaking of perspectives wise, there is a podcast that I truly enjoy, which is called The Knowledge Project. The Knowledge Project is by Shane Parrish, and Shane Parrish is actually the author of this next book. Now, Shane Parrish's tagline is something along the lines of understanding the best of what other people have to offer by things that they've already figured out. I kind of butchered the tagline, but that is pretty much it. And he wrote this book called The Great Mental Models. Now, The Great Mental Models is a great book for me because it has different ways of thinking. That is essentially what a mental model is. So in the mental models book, you will come across Occam's razor, Hanlon's razor, how to remember the cartographer. These are different ways of thinking in first principles, working in your circle of competence. These are different ways of thinking which helped me in terms of problem solving, especially when it comes to medicine, because problem solving is the foundation of medicine. It's the foundation of how a lot of us achieve things in life and think clearly. And this book helps me as a point of reference. I always keep it on my coffee table. It's always close within reach so I can have a look at it. But it is a great book for me, and I found it because of his podcast, because I was open to listening to his podcast and also his perspective. But this book has changed the way I approach several different tasks and several different problems on a day-to-day basis. Moving on from Shane, I would probably say if we stick to problem solving, but also medicine, I would describe Atul Gawande as another author that has shaped and changed everything I do. Especially as a baby vet, this book came in handy. The reason I say that this book came in handy is because Atul Gawande's premise is a very genuine account of what it's like to be a junior doctor. But not only that, this was the first book that made me realize that doctors were human. Now, generally, when I started vet school, I didn't really read that much, because when you're in school and you're studying, reading is tough and it is difficult, but you have to do it for your coursework. But when I tried to read leisurely, I couldn't. And so I would find myself just sitting down, trying to study a book, highlighting every word, which is not the way you're supposed to read a general fiction or non-fiction book that you pick up. You have to kind of enjoy it a bit. So during the summer, I used to let my hair down, metaphorically, used to let my hair down. And then when it came towards the end of summer and close to semester time, I would try and pick up a book that was medically inclined so that I would get my mind into the way of thinking. And that's when I first picked up Atul Gawande, I think in my second to last year of uni. Now, the reason why I said this is a good book is because, yes, it describes the failures of medicine and the fact that you will fail as a junior doctor and it's okay to fail. Give yourself some grace, because everybody wants the best doctor, but nobody wants the junior doctor that's going to come in and make all the mistakes. But the junior doctor has to make all the mistakes in order to become the best doctor. So this was a really good book for me, a really good read for me, because I definitely think it changes and challenges a lot of my biases, but also gives me grace when I practice medicine, so that I know that it's okay to make mistakes, you can recover from it, just make sure you hold yourself accountable and work on from there. So this was another really good book. Speaking of accountability and tying in with Shane Parrish's Knowledge Project podcast, there is Hold Me Tight, which is by Dr. Sue Johnston. Now, this is probably one of the first emotionally challenging books that I read. Definitely challenged my opinion on what it is to have emotions but also helped me when it came to understanding conflict resolution. I read it not because I was in a struggling marriage or not because I was in a struggling relationship, but more so because the fact that I wanted to garner insights and perspective as to what that's like, but also how to conflict resolve with somebody that you're supposed to essentially spend the rest of your life with. Hold Me Tight was extremely valuable in just understanding interpersonal relationships and dealing with triggers and understanding that people have raw spots, and also understanding that sometimes we can project what we feel inside onto other people. Definitely a power book, and definitely a book about intimacy with those around you. And I genuinely enjoyed reading this one because of the emotional aspect of it, and I could lean more into the feminine, which is something that Brene Brown has helped me a lot with, because Brene Brown, daring greatly, if there's anybody that is going to teach me a little bit about emotions, it is Brene. Now, I first came across Brene on a Netflix special. Her stuff is centered around shame. She is a shame expert, self-proclaimed shame expert, but she talks a lot about shame and vulnerability, and how we can feel vulnerable without feeling shameful, and understanding that it's part of a process, but also understanding that your emotions are a superpower and your vulnerability is also a superpower, and it makes you stronger and it makes you a better individual, and that we all have vulnerable moments, but it is important for us to embrace those moments and expose that soft side of ourselves, because that's how essentially we get better as individuals. So yeah, this was another fantastic read from Brene Brown. And Brene is probably one of the people that made me lean more into feminist authors and female authors as well, after I started getting more in touch with my emotions. And that's when I started reading Invisible Women. Now, I'd read this book probably once before, I think in 2018 or 2019. Invisible Women makes you understand the fact that we live in a patriarchal society. And when I first wrestled with the concept of this book, which I say wrestle very lightly, because it's not difficult to understand the fact that the whole world was built for a 6'4", well, not 6'4", the whole world was built for a 6-foot white male. So a lot of the things in society today are built without regard for others, and don't take into account how others experience the world, whether it's the sizes of our phones, whether it's the height of shelves, whether it's the creation of Viagra, whether it's the fact that all women's toilets have lines. Women have to wait ages just to go to the toilet. This is stuff to do with the patriarchy and how systemically infiltrated it is within our society, and understanding that even things like maternal work, like maternal labor, and how it's deemed as free work, it's another concept that you wrestle with. And once you start to lean into feminism, believe me, fellas, it is a slippery slope, because then your mind starts to open, and my mind started to open not just in feminism, but also intersectionality. And I will definitely do a whole separate video on this. You should let me know if you want me to do a separate video on intersectionality. But essentially, intersectionality is the idea that as an individual, you will have a number of different things that will cause prejudice on you. As a black male, for example, I will experience prejudice in the form of racism. And as a white female, you may experience prejudice in the form of the patriarchy and misogyny. Now, intersectionality is where those two lines cross, and where you might experience both of those things because you are, for example, a black female, or a black trans female, or a black cis female. You may experience those magnified factors of oppression and prejudice. And when you start reading into intersectionality and you start to seek out authors that have that experience, you start to learn a lot more about the world, and also challenge your own beliefs and how you get through the world. But not only that, challenge your privilege. And I don't want to go down this route for this video because it is a very deep slope. But let me just tell you that there are some great authors here that have discussed those topics from their perspective. I have Tressie McMillan Cotton here, who has Thick. We also have Angela Saini, who talks about race in Superior. I also have, who else do I have here? That we've got Kate Mann talks about feminism here. I've got the Black Girl Bible, Stay in Your Lane. I have Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. That's also another great book. Bell hooks. Oh my gosh, how could I forget bell hooks? Once you start reading bell hooks, I tell you, you start to understand things a lot more differently. The imagery that we have to play with our society, also how we speak about things, and just generally our outlook on the world and how skewed it is by remnants of whether it's colonialism or just our own biases that we have in the Western world. So yes, but let me not go too deep. And before I wrap up the video, I want to talk about another book that changed a lot of my perspectives on things, which is The 7 Spiritual Laws by Deepak Chopra. I read this at a time when I was finishing university. Sometimes you feel a little bit lost by things. And this is a very small book, a very brief read, but it is a good read nonetheless. It's essentially just 7 spiritual laws of success. One of my favorite laws is the law of detachment, and it's the idea that you should detach from the final goal and not place so much emphasis on the final outcome. Your routes from A to B may look different from person to person, and it may not be the route that you thought it was going to be, but you should enjoy the process and not place so much weight on what is going to come out of it. More so, enjoy the process, learn from the process, and embellish the process. And then when things come out of it, you just take it and keep moving on to the next thing, you know? And that's really something that I've started to sit with a lot more, of just enjoying the process and detaching from the outcome, because there's no point placing such heavy expectations on the outcome, because happiness is equal to expectations minus reality, which is something from Mo Godat's Soul for Happy, which is somewhere in this heap of books behind me. Now, that was just a quick, what was that, 10 books? 3, 6, 8, 9. I've mentioned over 10 books now. And that was just a quick session. I did want this video to be a lot longer. And I had already filmed one, but my microphone cut out on me. So I had to reshoot this and also edit it in time for Thursday. So we'll deal with the shorter one. But if you like this format of video, if you liked me droning on, let me know. If you didn't like me droning on, also let me know. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know the books that you are planning to read or the books that you are reading right now. I am currently reading the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. I've been taking that everywhere with me. I am reading that, and the last book I read was The Examined Life by Stephen Groats, a super interesting read and a very intellectual read about psychology. Let me know if there's any topics that I touched on or grazed that you want me to do a better video on, or let me know if any of these titles behind me attract your eye and you want me to do a separate videos about them. Let me know. I'm also using this video as a accountability exercise and also an encouragement exercise to get me back into reading, and it has made me realize that I do miss it a little bit and I do want to continue getting back into the swing of things. But as always, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, thank you for tuning in. Your support is very much appreciated, and I will see you on the next video.